Good evening. Welcome back to the Glazov Gang. For our second segment, our Glazov Gang members are Susanne Reyto, author of Pursuit of Freedom, Mark Tapson, Shillman Journalism at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and I think you were also once on the cover of GQ magazine.
More than once.
Okay.
Several times. I lost count.
Okay. And Eric Allen Bell, writer and filmmaker. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
This particular segment is entitled Obama's Romance with the Muslim Brotherhood. Susanne, when Obama visited Egypt to give his speech several years ago, there were some very interesting ingredients of what happened in terms of the itinerary and who showed up and who didn't. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
In 2009, June, when Obama went to Cairo to give the speech, there was a diplomatic faux pas because Mubarak did not meet him at the airport, which is rather unusual for a diplomatic protocol, and also didn't attend the speech at the university. He sent his son, and the story is that Mubarak refused to attend and greet Obama because he was asked to reserve the first 2 rows at the university lecture for the Muslim Brotherhood members. And I think if we have a president who from here demands certain ways, maybe I would agree with Mubarak to do what he did. Or not to do what
Susanne, an incredible naivete, or is there something more sinister in the heart of Barack Obama to have done this?
I don't believe Obama is naive. I think he does everything by design. Everything is well planned. And I really believe that he was, whether you'd call it indoctrinated or groomed, he was raised as a Muslim child in Indonesia till he was 13. And I think your formative years are in a certain religion. Even if you change, convert, perhaps basically it's always with you.
So we're saying that there's some sympathy for the Islamic world, not necessarily that he's a secret Muslim or something like that, but we also see traces of anti-Semitism, a bullying of Israel in the administration. Do you think that's a part of it as well?
I think the anti-Israel sentiments are major.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've always had supportive administrations. And Israel is the only ally we have in the Middle East. We need to support each other.
And
we need to support them. The tiny little country who's accomplished so much, why should it carry the burden of the world?
And the Obama administration has chosen Israel to bully during all this time. Eric, how do you read this? An American president wanting the Muslim Brotherhood to be seated in the first 2 rows while he's giving a speech. He thinks that after his speech they're going to start reading Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine?
No, I think within the liberal world is a perception that America is the worst bully in the world, that Islamic terrorists really aren't Islamic terrorists. They're freedom fighters that are just getting a bad rap, and that these are reasonable people who can be reasoned with. And anyone wanting to really understand how Obama was indoctrinated, watch all those tapes of Jeremiah Wright, his spiritual advisor. The guy is hardcore anti-American.
Wait a minute. Obama was sitting in his church for 20 years and he didn't hear a thing that he said. And he got away with that. What brings a president like Barack Obama to sympathize with Islamists and to reach out to them? What does he think he's going to achieve?
I have no idea.
Mark?
I think he's a president who was greatly influenced by his Islamic upbringing, for one thing, and also I think he's a president who is in pursuit of a post-American world, where America is no longer the superpower or possibly even a superpower. I think his sympathies all lie with America's third world victims, the victims of our imperialism and our greed. His sympathies lie there. I mean, you have to remember that this is a guy who, during that Cairo speech, said he believes that it is his duty as the President of the United States to combat stereotypes of Islam wherever they may appear. Since when was that a duty of an American president? So, I mean, you can see that where his sympathies lie.
Mark, is he an anti-American president?
I think he's anti-American in terms of the values that we perceive to be American. I don't think he considers himself to be anti-American. He wants a fundamentally transformed America.
Well, this is the thing that leftists say they love America, but the America that they're referring to is the one that they're going to build on the ashes that they want to destroy.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, all these problems in the Middle East and Egypt, everywhere we see, we cannot avoid this subject that there are large portions of the population in the Muslim world, in the Middle East, that supports Sharia, that supports stonings. Much of the population is illiterate, like in Afghanistan, for instance, uneducated. What are some of these problems, and what do you think that can be done about them? Susanne?
I think the illiterateness is probably one of the biggest issues, because most people don't read and can't go to school, and all they do is listen to the imam in the mosque where they go. And a lot of times the problems begin Friday afternoon after prayers.
Yeah.
And I think we have to realize...
What do you mean? What happens? What do you mean?
Well, a lot of times the uprisings and shootings and fights on the street happen, maybe because there's certain stimulus from the imam.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest problems is that we don't have enough people who understand Arabic. And we've learned that anytime they tell us what they tell is not the truth. Right. Arabic is one thing, and the English translation is the opposite.
Arafat used to give one speech in English and one speech in Arabic. I'll just say that as a Christian, we go to the Catholic Church, the priest, repeats what Christ's teachings, to love one another, turn the other cheek, forgiveness, etc. And you can't compare it with Islam. I mean, a huge portion of the Quran teaches hate of the infidels, etc., etc. And this is definitely a problem. In terms of books, am I not correct that Mein Kampf is a bestseller among the Palestinian population and in the Arab world? Eric, how do you see this problem in terms of illiteracy and lack of education and the population is not really reading anything?
I think that's a problem worldwide that's not unique to Islam. I think within our own country, we really need to kind of say the buck stops here as far as Sharia goes. If you're a Sharia-compliant mosque, you're not a religion, you're not protected under the First Amendment. If you're not Sharia-compliant, you're a religion and you are protected. And I think we really need to kind of have a really hard line as far as that goes and be intolerant of Sharia, in America, in our time. Otherwise, it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
If a person was to say to you, Sharia is not that bad, what would you answer?
They have. I've done interviews. They tell me it's not that bad.
Tell us some things about Sharia.
They say, well, you see, you have to understand it's all interpreted differently by different imams, and it depends on what part of the country you're in, and we're told as Muslims to follow the laws where we are here. Except that they're lying, of course. But it sounds great. But when you look at the percentage of mosques that are infiltrated with literature that is very anti-American, and it's a high percentage of mosques, I think that speaks louder than any soundbite somebody would have given me in that interview.
And women are seen as inferior, period.
Well,
right?
second class.
Second class,
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if I could just backtrack for a second, and in addition to the illiteracy and the lack of education, you also have to remember that these people are dealing with a media that is feeding them complete lies about the world all the time. Even some of the best, what we would consider, the best media sites like Al Jazeera or Al Arabiya, they're still feeding them these conspiracy theories about Israel and how Israel is using, spy sharks to destroy tourism in Egypt. Seriously, things like that. They're being fed all kinds of conspiracy theories and distortions about the outside world all the time.
Well, if you remember in Haiti, Israel was the first one to establish a field hospital and all the facilities until the Americans were able to come in and establish. But, instead of saying how wonderful Israel was to give that kind of service, they said they went there to harvest body parts. Of course, no matter how good it is, they convert it to bad. So unfortunately, we need the media who can change it. And in a way, the Internet has done a great deal because the Internet is still a worldwide issue, a little bit more Western influenced, and some of the young people who are able to access it are coming around and changing.
Like
but it's
in
very
Iran,
slow.
For example, in Iran.
It's a very slow process.
Yeah.
Iran's a great example.
This segment was called Obama's Romance with the Muslim Brotherhood. We began by discussing how Obama had invited the Muslim Brotherhood to sit in the front two rows in his outreach to the Muslim Brotherhood, etc. Now that we exit this segment, what should an American administration's policy be toward the Muslim Brotherhood and to all Islamists? How do we deal with them? Do we simply just ignore? Does there have to be some diplomacy? What do we do? Very quickly, 20 seconds each, Eric.
Hostile.
Let's say a new American president comes in. What does he do?
Very hostile. Needs to let them know. We just absolutely will not tolerate being messed with. You do not want to wake the sleeping giant. So I think we've made some mistakes in the past, and I personally think invading Iraq, the net effect of that was negative.
Yeah.
That needs to be corrected. Obama's made things worse. But I don't think you can reason with unreasonable people.
Yeah. I think what's very difficult is that the West, Israel, United States, humane societies and governments can't really fight with the same rules and weapons. For instance, the KGB in Russia, there was a couple Russian diplomats kidnapped at one time, and some families of the terrorists were kidnapped, and their ears were sent to the Arabs, and the Islamic terrorists released these hostages immediately, because that's how the KGB does business. The West and Israel can't behave in this way, but perhaps we can start being more ruthless on some level, right, Mark?
Well, I know there are a lot of politicians that claim to be pragmatists who say, the Muslim Brotherhood is now a reality in Egypt and elsewhere around the Middle East. Therefore we have to deal with them. So let's get to know them and that kind of thing. But you have to remember the Muslim Brotherhood's stated goal is the elimination of Western civilization and the establishment of a worldwide caliphate. And these are people who do not play well with others. They're not into compromise. So my two-word response to your question about how we need to deal with these people is zero tolerance.
Susanne, how better to finish a segment than with wisdom coming from you? Does the West have a Stockholm Syndrome in this case?
I definitely believe, and I think we need to start with our politicians who represent us, supposedly, and they need to be better educated. And I'm still not able to figure out, are they deliberately uninformed or they choose to be uninformed? And if they are, they better not be. And stealth jihad is another issue we have to really confront, because it's very, very difficult to find it. And the less we know, the more easy for them to penetrate. We need to be better informed so we can withstand it better.
Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll discuss that in our next segment tomorrow night. Join us. We'll be discussing To Kill a Christian Pastor. Good night.